The air in Kaya was cool that morning, a rare gift in the Sahel's dry season. In the corner of a small workshop, an elderly goldsmith bent over his workbench, polishing a simple bracelet. The gold came from Burkina Faso's own soil, dug from a mine only a few miles away. His customers today were his neighbors, not traders from distant lands. He didn't follow politics closely, but he knew this much: the gold was staying home. Just 2 years earlier, this seemed impossible. For decades, Burkina Faso's gold flowed outward, carried away by foreign mining giants in trucks and cargo ships. The nation received a mere 3% royalty, enough to register on paper, but never enough to change the lives of ordinary people. It was a familiar African story: rich land, poor citizens. Then, in 2022, Captain Ibrahim Traoré took power, young, determined, and unafraid of confrontation. He looked at the numbers and asked a question no leader before him had dared. Why are we watching strangers walk away with the lion's share of our wealth? That question sparked a transformation that would shake the mining industry from London to Toronto. The gold revolution was not about finding more gold, but about keeping more of its value within Burkina Faso's borders. Within 2 years, the nation had earned $18 billion in gold revenue, matching the country's entire annual GDP before Traoré came to power. And as the Bible says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Yet here, in the heart of West Africa, the question was whether this treasure and the hope it carried would remain in the hands of its people or slip away again. Before 2022, Burkina Faso's mining sector was like an open door in a storm. Wealth came in, but it went straight back out. International giants like Endeavour Mining, B2 Gold, and Lilium operated vast gold mines under contracts that granted them almost total freedom. The government's role was minimal: approve operations, collect a token 3-5% royalty, and stay out of the way. These contracts were born in an era when African governments were weak and desperate for foreign capital, signing away rights for the illusion of progress. Captain Ibrahim Traoré saw this for what it was: a colonial arrangement in modern clothing. Soon after taking power, he created the state-owned Société de Participation Minière du Burkina, SOPAMIB, with one clear mission: put national interest first. The government reviewed mining contracts, looking for leverage. Then came the decisive move nationalizing 5 major gold mining assets, including some run by Endeavour Mining and Lilium. These weren't reckless grabs. They were calculated strikes aimed at reclaiming control over the nation's wealth. Contracts were rewritten to give Burkina Faso authority over production, salaires, and revenue. The message to the world was clear: no more sweetheart deals, no more truckloads of gold dust vanishing toward foreign ports. While villages had no clean water, gold would now serve the people of Burkina Faso. The results stunned even supporters. In just over 2 years, gold revenue alone reached $18 billion. For a nation where most citizens lived on less than $2 a day, this was more than a number. It was proof that sovereignty could be measured in roads built, schools opened, and lives improved. But for every winner in this story, there were powerful losers. Mining companies saw their share prices tumble. Lawyers sharpened their legal arguments, and diplomats began quiet negotiations. And in the midst of it all, the question whispered through the corridors of power and down the dusty streets of Ouagadougou: when you stand against the most powerful economic forces on earth, do you shape your destiny or set the stage for a battle you cannot win? The pushback came swiftly. In corporate boardrooms from Toronto to London, executives who once treated Burkina Faso as a dependable cash register suddenly saw their profit streams shrinking. Stock prices dipped. Shareholder calls turned tense. And behind closed doors, legal teams drafted letters of warning. Some mining executives even hinted that the country would suffer an investment drought if it continued down this path. But inside Burkina Faso, The atmosphere was different. In Bobo Dioulasso, a mining engineering class was graduating its first cohort trained entirely by local instructors. One teacher, a man who had worked in the mines himself, stood before his students and said, "For the first time, we know how to run our own land without asking permission." His words drew quiet smiles, not the cheers of a rally, but the satisfaction of dignity regained. The international mining model had always relied on one unspoken rule: keep the technology out of local hands. Equipment maintenance, geological surveys, and mine planning were all kept under foreign control, ensuring dependency. But when foreign companies pulled out, they left behind fully operational mines. Instead of collapsing, Burkina Faso adapted. Engineers from China, Russia, and local technical colleges filled the gap. Open-source mining software replaced expensive licensed tools. Local technicians learned to repair equipment they had once been told was too complex for them. To the surprise of many outsiders, the mines kept running and running well. That fact alone sent shockwaves across Africa, as governments in Mali, Niger, and beyond began asking whether they, too, could reclaim their industries. Yet for every country considering such a move, there was also a warning: the higher you climb, the more the winds of opposition will try to knock you down. In the markets of Ouagadougou, vendors now talk about gold not as a distant export, but as a source of schools, roads, and clinics. But in those same conversations, an old truth lingers: gold can unite a people or tempt them into division. And somewhere in the heart of the Sahel, the question remains whether Burkina Faso's unity can withstand the pressures that always follow newfound wealth. Gold has a way of changing the rhythm of a country. In Ouagadougou, freshly paved roads now cut through neighborhoods that once turned into rivers of mud during the rainy season. In Kaya, a new primary school stands where there was once only a dusty field, its walls painted a bright yellow that catches the sun. In the Sahel region, small health clinics have sprung up, offering care to families who used to travel hours for the simplest treatment. For the first time in decades, many Burkinabe can point to tangible improvements and say, "This came from our gold." And yet, in the shade of these new buildings, conversations often turn to caution. A mother in Dori, watching her children walk home from school with new textbooks, admits she feels both joy and unease. "I'm happy for them," she says softly, "but I wonder what happens when the gold runs out or when greed returns." That's why the government has begun investing in domestic refining plants, jewelry workshops, and training programs, ways to add value at home rather than shipping raw gold abroad. It is an effort to ensure that when the veins of ore are gone, the country's prosperity does not vanish with them, but as the gold flows, so too does the temptation. Politicians face pressure from allies and rivals alike, each with their own vision of how the money should be spent. Some want rapid development. Others push for military expansion to secure the nation's borders. The balance between investing for the future and satisfying the demands of the present grows more fragile with every billion earned. And in the quiet moments, the question hangs over the nation, like the Harmattan dust in December: will this be the foundation of a lasting economy, or the fleeting shine of a country caught in the glare of sudden wealth? Beyond Burkina Faso's borders, the shockwaves are still spreading. In Mali and Niger, leaders are watching closely, some with admiration, others with caution. The idea that an African government could seize control of its resources and not collapse under foreign pressure is rewriting the rules of the game in the Sahel. In Western capitals, however, the mood is less celebratory. For mining companies headquartered in Canada, Britain, and Australia, the Burkina Faso example is a dangerous precedent. If one nation can walk away from decades-old partnerships and still thrive, others may be tempted to do the same. That would mean renegotiating contracts, losing control of supply chains, and perhaps most threatening of all, diminishing Western influence in a strategically sensitive region. For the United States, the situation is complicated. Burkina Faso lies in a region where counterterrorism operations and security partnerships are critical. A wealthier, more self-reliant Burkina Faso could become a stronger partner or a more independent one. Less inclined to align with Washington's priorities, policymakers face a dilemma: support the country's economic independence and risk losing leverage, or push back and risk alienating a potential ally. Meanwhile, in Moscow and Beijing, officials see opportunity. Russia has already deepened security ties in parts of Africa, and China's model of resource-backed infrastructure projects fits neatly with a nation eager to build quickly. The more Burkina Faso asserts itself against Western companies, the more it opens doors to these alternative powers. Across the continent, the story has become a quiet litmus test. Can Africa's resources serve Africans first, without isolating the nations that take that path? Or will the pressure to conform to old systems eventually bend even the most determined leaders? And somewhere in that uncertainty, the fate of a continent's economic future is being written in gold dust. In the markets of Ouagadougou, gold jewelry now hangs in stalls like ripe fruit, gleaming under the sun. To the casual eye, it is simply commerce. But to those who know the story, each piece carries the weight of a nation's struggle for dignity. The $18 billion earned in just 2 years is not only a figure in a ledger, it is the proof that a small African country can face down global giants and stand taller for it. Yet history is a stern teacher. Across Africa, there are tales of sudden wealth turned sour of nations whose riches fed palaces and private jets but left their people in poverty. The challenge before Ibrahim Traoré is not just to hold the gold, but to turn it into something that will outlast the mines themselves. Roads crumble, money spends, but institutions, education, and faith endure. In the Gospel of Matthew, there is a reminder: the wise man built his house upon the rock. Gold can build houses, but only wisdom builds them on solid ground. If Burkina Faso invests not just in stone and steel, but in its people, it could prove that African prosperity is not a fleeting spark, but a steady flame. Still, the question remains, whispered in both village courtyards and international boardrooms: is this the dawn of a new era for Africa? Or just a bright moment before the old order reasserts itself? The Gold Revolution in Burkina Faso is about more than money. It is about sovereignty, justice, and the hope that the blessings of the land may finally rest upon those who till it. And perhaps, as every Burkinabe prays when the rains come, the same prayer now applies to this new wealth. May it fall where it is most needed. May it nourish the roots. And may it not be swept away by the floods of greed,